Hello, and welcome to this edition of Represent NYC on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I'm Lincoln Mitchell, political analyst and author of The Democracy Promotion Paradox. The first few months of the Trump presidency have raised questions about the relationship between Trump and American Jews. Some in the Jewish community have been concerned about some of the president's senior advisors, notably Steve Bannon and Sebastian Gorka, who are viewed by some as anti-Semites. In the administration's early days, the White House issued a statement on Holocaust Remembrance Day that did not even mention Jews. Additionally, a rise in anti-Semitic incidents has caused many to be concerned. However, the Trump administration has remained a strong supporter of Israel, and the president himself has on several occasions forcibly condemned anti-Semitism. Supporters of the president point to his reliance on his Jewish son-in-law and daughter as further evidence of his positive views towards the Jewish people. We are going to discuss this today with our guests, Marisa Fox, a journalist and writer for the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, and Rabbi Josh Weinberg, who is the president of the Association of Reform Zionists of America. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
I'd like to begin, Marisa, I'll aim this at you first with a big picture question. Should American Jews look at President Trump and the administration differently than previous administrations? There's something going on here, as Trump would say, about which American Jews should be concerned.
I do. I think American Jews should be concerned. I think American Jews shouldn't be fooled by the fact that he has a Jewish daughter and a Jewish son-in-law who is his most trusted advisor. I think that there's been an alarming spike in anti-Semitism since he started his campaign. I think that he's sort of talked through both sides of his mouth when it comes to Israel, and he's certainly talked through both sides of his mouth when it comes to supporting American Jewry. I think he appeals to a populist base, and if it's expedient for him, he'll do what he has to do to keep his ratings up, though who knows what that really means. So I think that when it comes to Israel, when it comes to Jews, I don't see a lot of substance there. I know that May is suddenly Jewish American Heritage Month,
is that right?
Or something like that. He declared that the other day. What does that mean? Yeah. And does that excuse the many gaffes he's made, Spicer has made, and on and on and on throughout his campaign, and the really alarming rise in anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, xenophobia that we are witnessing right now.
Josh, what are your thoughts? Are you concerned?
Yeah, I have to, of course, agree and definitely concerned. And some of the red flags that came early on in the campaign was if you're a candidate running for office and you're getting retweeted by David Duke and the KKK is coming out in full support of your candidacy, that is deeply troubling. And the failure to even condemn that, the failure to even attempt to distance yourself from those deeply, deeply troubling, not even trying to mask it or covering up with some other name. That's coming out first. Then some of the trends that you saw, it's almost like the manifestation of Philip Roth's novel, A Plot Against America, where you have the anti-Semitic force coming up. Whether Trump is anti-Semitic or not himself, the fact that he's surrounding himself by such characters like Bannon, like Sebastian Gorka, and even some others, I think is deeply, deeply troubling.
I want to just briefly, because both of you touched on this a little bit, and talk about Israel for a second. Trump's Israel policy so far has been a bit of a puzzle, right? He came out with very, very hawkish, very kind of Likudnik positions, and then moved away from that, and then kind of went back to the middle and said, two state, one state, like he was ordering something in a pizza place. It didn't seem to make a lot of difference to him. What do you see this so far? Where do you see Trump's Israeli policy going?
Yeah. Thank you for asking, and this is more my area of expertise. First of all, what I think we can look at Trump and what all of this is showing is his deep ignorance of the situation. He's displayed ignorance on many other subjects as well, notably American history, but he really has no idea, no deep investment in working with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the negotiation process, like we saw in a Bill Clinton or even Obama. So he came out with an AIPAC speech that was sort of a typical AIPAC speech last year at the policy conference. This year did not come to the conference as the sitting president. What's been interesting is to see who he's appointed. So first of all, he appointed David Friedman to be his ambassador, who was a very controversial figure, both for his comments that he made out loud about liberal Jews and for his policies of supporting the settlements. He was the president of the American Friends of the Settlement, Beit El, and has given a considerable amount of money to that settlement. And then also what's fascinating to watch in the past few months is his top advisor, Jason Greenblatt, who was his personal real estate lawyer since 1997, now coming as his chief envoy to Israel, who's been, I'm trying to be objective about it, actually, and to see that, he just returned from a listening tour to both Israel, the Palestinian territories. He went to the Arab, the Arab League meeting in Jordan, has met with Abbas, went to a Palestinian refugee camp, went to an ultra-Orthodox yeshiva, and has been really sort of a fresh look at it. And I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic about it because, who knows? Maybe this will be the kickstart that is deeply needed after professional diplomats have not been able to make it happen. So it's fascinating to watch, and I think that he would be best by learning and talking to experts on the subject.
So I'm going to be even more cynical than you.
Okay.
I appreciate you being hopeful. I would love to be hopeful, but think about even who Friedman is. Friedman was his bankruptcy attorney, okay? So this is who he appoints to a diplomatic position in the Middle East, a man that he basically owes the shirt off his back to. It's all about money when it comes to Trump. And that's why I don't trust that what he's going to do in Israel has any substance. I think if you look at his record in the Middle East, he's traveled to the Arab countries a lot more. He's invested. You mentioned the word investment. Follow the money with Trump. That's really all that matters to him. If
he has no investment or ties in Israel
that's
at
right.
all.
He was supposed to build a Trump Tower in Israel. That fell through. He made overtures to a mayor of a town where he was going to build golf resorts, then a hotel, most beautiful, beautiful hotel, and spa. That fell through. But February, the Trump sons traveled to Dubai, where he opened a new golf course. So I think that is what motivates him, and he will placate the Friedmans and the Greenblatts because he owes them. But I don't think he's going to, I don't think he really has an ideology. I don't think he knows anything about what he wants. He's just going to do whatever's expedient.
Yeah, and I think, it's hard to get into the real psyche of Trump and all of his narcissistic personality disorders. And I think what he wants is to be the hero. And so if he can say, all right, I was able to make this deal when no one else can make the deal, and remember, his whole campaign about we need negotiators and we need to do these things. Okay, I don't care. Let him be the hero if it can achieve peace. What's interesting is looking at it from the Israeli perspective also. Now, Netanyahu, despite his sort of icy relationship with Obama over the years, I think he actually needed Obama to help keep his far right in check. He could say, listen, I'm with you in heart and in spirit.
This guy's pushing me.
Yeah, but exactly. But that pesky Obama is really bothering me, and this is not the good time to push this agenda forward. And I think that Netanyahu was wary of what Trump would come in and do and say, listen, you have the green light, let's expand, let's annex territory over the green line. And now Trump is saying, wait a second, not so fast. And I think Trump is realizing that the system that was set in place over 200 years ago with checks and balances actually does work. And he's saying maybe this is not the right time to do this. We don't want a total uprising. We're holding off on moving the embassy to Jerusalem. We'll see what happens. Trump's also left a plethora of positions unnominated or unfilled in the State Department. So all these people who were professional negotiators and who were really doing the groundwork in setting this up, they're just empty. There's some people sitting in empty offices, sitting with nothing to do.
Maybe if I could probe a little bit here.
Please.
If the president fails to bring a lasting peace in the Middle East, he will be in the company of all of our recent presidents, right? This is not that's a really high bar by which to measure even the best negotiator in the world, right? But there's another question here, which I think you were touching at, which is that is a Trump foreign policy, is a Trump foreign policy going to be, on the one hand, support, as it seemed at first, the most hawkish elements in the Israeli political society? I think we're not so clear about that anymore. Mm-hmm. Or is it going to be consistent with the general support for Israel that we have seen from almost pretty much all of our recent presidents, and it is very important to the Jewish community, even the absence of a lasting peace? Do you have concerns or thoughts on that? Marisa, maybe you can start.
Well, I think one of his biggest Jewish supporters has been Sheldon Adelson, who I've heard has cooled to him somewhat in the past week or so. Sheldon Adelson is very hawkish. He started an Israeli newspaper, Israel Hayom, and during Trump's campaign, he was taking out ads all over Israeli media, pro-Trump, pro-Trump. So pushing the Trump message, pushing that hawkishness. So Trump feels indebted to his supporters and feels indebted to push what he perceives as a hawkish agenda. At the same time, he's in bed with the Saudis. He's in bed with the Emiratis. He's in bed with, Dubai and, all those other countries. I don't know where his alliances fall. I think it's all about who's going to give him more money. I think he's a president for sale and he doesn't have an ideology. I mean, the fact that he said if Jared can't broker a Middle East peace, now, how is Jared capable of brokering a what experience does he have?
We're going to get to Jared.
Yeah. No, I just want to pick up on what you said earlier, being the case of just extreme inconsistency. And that look at who Trump championed as heroes and as strong leaders during his campaign. Saddam Hussein, because he fought terrorists. Gaddafi, right? He said, because now Libya's a mess and we should have Gaddafi. Look at his ties to Putin and Putin's involvement in the Middle East and what that looks like.
He congratulated Erdogan, who
exactly.
had been in alliance there.
Exactly. Highly problematic characters, especially looking, for Saddam Hussein also supported terrorism and funded, suicide bombers' families in Israel. That's, these are terrible alliances. And Trump, then supports Netanyahu as well. I think Trump has just no idea what he wants. He wants to be the hero. This incredible inconsistency that flip-flops night and day from one day to the next. He was, terribly anti-China. Now he's cozying up to China. What's the story and how that's going to play along? The sort of erratic shooting from the hip to attack Syria, which we probably know was encouraged by Ivanka, who had this, sort of visceral, emotional reaction that many of us did after seeing the horrible attack in the hospital. And just no plan there. There is no plan.
See, I don't believe it was. I don't believe it was really Ivanka, but that's me.
Okay.
I think he used that, and it's with him it's all smoke and mirrors, like you said. He says one thing, he does another. He's constantly flip-flopping. I think this is a distraction. Everything is a distraction for him, and I think that goes back to his attitude towards Jews.
Josh, you and earlier you mentioned Sebastian Gorka and Steve Bannon. I mentioned them in the introduction. If you were a low-level, lower down to the hierarchy White House employee in the George W. Bush administration, and you had invited one of them to a reception in the White House, you probably would have lost your job, right? It's not imaginable that Barack Obama would have invited Steve Bannon, so let's leave that aside for a second. But that's the kind of people we're talking about. I'm curious about both of your thoughts. Maybe Josh, you can begin about what danger do they pose?
Yeah.
But also, how do they get there?
Right.
How does this get to the point when someone says, "Hey, Gorka"? I mean, Bannon, I guess I was about to say he's your rabbi, but bad analogy.
Yeah,
but Gorka, how is this guy there?
Yeah, Gorka is an extremely problematic character. He comes from Hungary, from the far, far right party in Hungary that has ties to the sort of larger, more mainstream far right party, Jobbik. You can tell that he has the connections to the Order of the Vitej, which is this, sort of secret anti-Semitic order that goes back to the 1920s. They were the ones who received property that was Jewish property that was confiscated during the war, where the Jews were killed and removed. He even signs his PhD thesis, his dissertation, with the letter V that reminds the people that he's a member and full loyal adherent to that party. And he even wears that medal when he testifies before Congress. Right? So to say that, he used to have ties to something, or he's disavowed all that and now it's a new person, no. And we have to watch that very, very carefully. And there are others who, so why does Trump want him in his administration? Why does he want Bannon, who I'm told by, this is something we also have to be careful of. The new editor of Breitbart News, Joel Pollack, is an observant Jew and says, no, Steve Bannon cannot be anti-Semitic because he gives me off on the Jewish holidays and he's fair. Look at what Steve Bannon writes and what he says. It's very clear.
I wonder, and this issue of he can't be anti-Semitic because X, Y, and Z. He can't be anti-Semitic because he lets me get Rosh Hashanah off, right? He can't be anti-Semitic because his daughter converted to Judaism. Whatever. This is, to me, is the kind of thing you would say if you didn't know what anti-Semitism was, really. But I want to get to that. But first, I want to maybe get to that in a different angle, because One of the theory we hear most frequently is, how can he be an anti-Semite? His daughter is Jewish. His son-in-law is an observant Jew. This is not all that more sophisticated than saying some of my best friends are African American. I mean, so Marisa, what do you make of this? What is the role of Jared and Ivanka as kind of giving an administration cover? Do you think they play a productive role in this on Jewish issues? What are your thoughts?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think they do give it cover. You mentioned Joel Pollack. He totally went at me on Twitter. I had to block him, along with all the Pepper the Frog memes and all those, swastikas. We're in a very strange time when you can be an anti-Semite and be pro-Israel. And the way I make sense out of it is, it goes back to nationalism. I mean, think of all the people that Trump adores. They're all these sort of far-right nationalists, fascists, many of them, dictators. It sort of gets back to Hitler. He didn't want Jews in this country, in his country, in Germany. There was the Madagascar plan. Well, there's no Madagascar, there's Israel. So for many of these people, they don't want Jews in their country. Give them Israel. And it sort of gets back to also the fact that they're very Christian, evangelical. They believe in the rapture. So Jews need to be in Israel for the rapture to come. And that gets into, the religious base and the Jeff Sessions and the people who don't believe in the separation of church and state. And who push this far-right agenda that's, anti-choice and school prayer. It's all tied together. And I think Jared and Ivanka totally give Trump cover. Maybe he's not anti-Semitic, but he doesn't think twice about, exploiting those anti-Semitic tropes that go way back, Jews and money, America first, all those things that are, dog whistles to that base that he knows how to use and exploit, that suddenly makes them feel validated. They've always been there. They come in and out of power. I mean, you mentioned Sebastian Gorka. His mother was a translator for David Irving, the British Holocaust denier. Okay, you could say, well, that's his mother, but you know what I'm saying? Like, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Yeah.
So
Family, yeah.
that's right. Yeah. So, when you talk about Holocaust denial, look at Sebastian Gorka. Look at the statements that they put out first in January for Holocaust Remembrance, the UN International Holocaust Remembrance Day, that was devoid of Jews, that left Jews out of the Holocaust. There's no wonder, with people like Bannon and Gorka there.
Now, just want to get to you in a second, Jeff, but
Sure.
on most television shows, and I think we're going to be trying to be better than most television shows, the discussion goes something like this. You are brought on and you say that, and then someone says, but his daughter is Jewish. And that kind of ends the conversation. That seems very strange to me. That seems to be a way to not talk about the question and the problem.
Well, I think you said it perfectly, and that this is just a cliche. Right? Oh, my best friend, well, my daughter is. So let's not judge someone by their words necessarily, but by their actions as well. Right? So he can say, he can talk in as many superlatives as he wants, as he is wont to do. There's no greater supporter of the Jewish people than I am. Well, okay, then don't bring on Sebastian Gorka. Don't bring on Bannon, and reject the KKK, reject Duke. When you mention the Jewish people, when you mention the Holocaust, if you do a comparison of Obama's statements on Holocaust Remembrance Day and Trump's statements, I mean, it's night and day. It's unbelievable. Now, there's a few other things that we can look at in terms of Trump's policies and what he's doing, and expanding this, this circle of xenophobia and against anyone who is not mainstream. We're seeing a huge rise in the alt-right. Right? For instance, characters like Richard Spencer, who is a member of, representative of the American neo-Nazi Party, and is caught on film saying, "Hail Trump." Right? So even if Trump's not encouraging that themselves, all these things are coming out of the woodwork. And as a Zionist, by the way, I'm very concerned that people are perceiving Zionism to be connected to the alt-right, which was really anything but, and couldn't be further from those sentiments that I think are extremely dangerous, especially if you look where Richard Spencer is from, in Montana. There's going to be a Nazi march in Whitefish, Montana. I mean, whoa.
Family in Montana. So
yeah, and I grew up in Skokie, Illinois, in 1979, where the last, the big famous Nazi march, and are we seeing history repeat itself?
I want to maybe ask a bigger picture question. So there's a couple of things that really struck me. First, Donald Trump has reintroduced America First into the political vernacular. America First is an anti-Semitic buzzword in my view. It dates back to Lindbergh saying America first. The next sentence was, don't let the Jews bring us into a foreign war, because we have to remember that history. But the second, we're going to take a brief look at Donald Trump's last campaign commercial, a clip or two from that.
The establishment has trillions of dollars at stake in this election. For those who control the levers of power in Washington and for the global special interest, they partner with these people that don't have your good in mind.
And there's a couple of things in there that really strike me. Some of the language that he uses. For example, global special interests. These people don't have your good in mind. And if you look at the whole commercial, it's 2 minutes, you can see it on YouTube. The faces they show are, of course, Hillary Clinton, because she was the candidate at that time. Tim Kaine was the running mate. Bill Clinton, because he's Bill Clinton. And then 3 or 4 other people who are all Jews with all Jewish names. Now, this seems to me to be much more at the core of what anti-Semitism is, which is it's not just like, oh, I have a Jewish son-in-law, therefore I can't be. And it's even not just Sean Spicer said something that, I'm not going to say this too often, but in fairness to Sean Spicer, he probably regrets saying, right? It seems to me
his words, yeah.
this is much more serious. These are the things that lead to pogroms, that lead to much worse than pogroms. Am I misreading that, or is there something real here?
I think there's something very real there. And looking at that commercial in hindsight now, it's so ironic because look who he's appointed to his cabinet, all Goldman Sachs people. You know, he uses Goldman Sachs to get elected, Jews and money, Goldman Sachs and, you know, George Soros, who's still the boogeyman. I mean, I have friends who are well-read and intelligent. They're, you know, on the right. Maybe they didn't vote for Trump, and they still believe that George Soros paid for, you know, the Women's March in D.C. So he knows how to exploit that. He puts out the fake news. During his campaign, you know, Pepe the Frog, the retweeting of David Duke, that sheriff badge with Hillary and the cash, that was all in that commercial, his last campaign ad. And then you think, you know, he knows how to dog whistle to that base, but then when he's in power, what does he do? He brings in all the Jews with the money because, as he also said on the campaign trail, I want Jews to count my money.
Right, which is an appalling thing.
Which is an appalling thing to
And I think
say.
that the images that we saw in that commercial are by no stretch a coincidence and not random. And I think that they are highly, you know, contrived and highly, you know, strategically placed to send the message, you know, the dog whistle, exactly what he wants to do. I think that what we're seeing is a phenomenon of this culture of suggestive anti-Semitism. There are many different levels of anti-Semitism. We saw with Ted Cruz, even when he said, you know, the Manhattan culture, or if that's
values.
Manhattan values.
Yes.
What do you think that he meant by that? Also playing to his base, that is questionable. You don't have to deny the existence of the state of Israel to be an anti-Semite, and we're seeing it play out on different levels, and we're seeing it from the far left as well. But that's a different story.
Now, we are the Manhattan Neighborhood Network, but you can watch this show anywhere in the country and anywhere in the world because of the miracle of the internet. If you were watching this in a place with a small Jewish population, and if you were not Jewish, you might think that the last 3 minutes of this conversation was something that you'd never encountered before. These are not anti-Semitic buzzwords. There are special interests that are trying to stop us. These people just means people who are wealthy and don't care about us. He's not talking about Jews. How would you respond to that?
What we're seeing in general throughout the campaign and even the first 100 days of the presidency is an assault on the concept of truth. The whole, you know, it's already played out now about alternative facts and which facts play, and that Trump really has no problem saying whatever he wants to say. The Washington Post has counted over 400 factual errors in things that he said and tweeted, and that things have been said from the podium, from Sean Spicer's podium, you know, as the mouthpiece of the Trump administration. So it's a total disregard, and it's no wonder that people believe this. So people can say, well, Trump said it, so it must be true. Or if you say it enough times, if you get the reference that I'm referring to, then it will, of course, be believed. And I think Trump knows exactly what he's doing when he does that. And whoever he's being fed those things from, maybe his closer advisors, to be said, you know, just say this. Okay, if you need to apologize for it later. It took him a long time to come out and condemn the anti-Semitism that you mentioned in the intro, where he came after we're seeing, you know, forget about the bomb threats on JCCs and that it was found out that didn't come, thankfully, didn't come from the administration, which I think is actually a good thing. How do you explain the desecration of cemeteries? You know, not once, not twice. It's happening.
Didn't come from the administration. Didn't come from supporters of the administration.
So supporters of the administration.
Yeah,
thank you. Yeah, thank you for the clarification. But how long did it take him to come out? He finally sent Mike Pence to St. Louis to be there as they're cleaning up. But you have to be convinced to condemn anti-Semitism today.
I want to just end with one last question. We're running out of time here, but 71%, according to the exit polls, the fake news exit polls, CNN, I believe, of American Jews voted for Hillary Clinton. That is a higher number than Latinos proportionally. Now, I've spoken to some Latino scholars about this who study Latino voting, and they said that number is probably higher than exit polls. There's some methodological issues, but it's pretty much about the same. That seems to me to be something that is not outside of the Jewish world. People don't know that. And it seems to me there are reasons why people on both sides don't necessarily want you to know that. But Jews, American Jews, are in an unusual position, right? Most American Jews present as white. White people voted pretty substantially for Donald Trump. Jews didn't. How does that create challenges for Jews going forward in this administration? I mean, be very brief if you can. Marisa, maybe start.
So, I think that there are challenges for Jews in some challenges and hopeful signs. In some ways, his xenophobia, Trump's xenophobia, has brought Jews and Muslims together. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think that is going to be a very strong deterrent for, say, and God forbid, a Trump reelection. I think we have to build coalition, and we have to remind ourselves of what our values are. I think we need to, as Jews, not fall for this, line of he's pro-Israel, he's got, a son-in-law and a daughter who are Jewish, he'll have our back better than anyone else. And that is a challenge, is Jews having to say, we can be Zionists, but we can be liberals, and we can have humanitarian values that help us build consensus with Muslims and other groups.
Yeah, I think it's a very important point, and I think that the Jews have to stay vocal, and I'm proud that Jews are leading what's called the resistance, or many of the protest movements that are speaking out for other groups that are under attack and are under threat. And I worry about the 29% of Jews that did vote for Trump, and you can see there is a diversity within the Jewish community, and we have to look for reasons, to rise up and bring us together.
Okay, thank you. That's all the time we have. Thank you to my guests, Marisa and Josh, for joining me, and thank you for watching this edition of Represent NYC on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I'm Lincoln Mitchell. Goodbye.